Lawmakers had a constitutional duty to object to Joe Biden's fraudulent electoral college votes because we all believe that the election had been stolen. This happens as Trump is being arrested and processed. And it feels like, absent Dana Milbank reporting it out and writing about it and bringing it to our attention, we might have missed a really important move in what is basically being created on Washington's version of a soundstage, right? This wasn't real, but it was created for a very deliberate reason. And I wonder what you think.
The threat is real. It's a national security threat, and it has to be treated as such. Were the members of ISIS and al-Qaeda unavailable to testify yesterday? I mean, these people are celebrating enemies of America. I don't think that insurrectionist goes far enough in naming what these people are. They are domestic terrorists, and they continue to be at large. I think this is an important part of this conversation that people don't understand. The FBI is still looking for participants in the January 6th attack. Just yesterday, the Boston FBI arrested 2 people. If you go to the FBI's Twitter page, you can see that they're still looking for the pipe bombers that set, or pipe bomber that set pipe bombs outside of DNC and RNC on January 6th. So this is an active, unfolding investigation, and it's an imminent, active, and rising national security threat. That's why I've called it the American Insurgency. It includes members of Congress. It includes the former president. It includes the former national security advisor in General Flynn. And it goes all the way down to the Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes, and people who could be convinced by their latest press conference. So it's much bigger than a political story. It's a national security threat, and it has to be treated as such.
Paul, what do you think creates not just the permission structure for something like this to happen that is, as Frank Figliuzzi says, a sham, but there was enough incentive, there was enough of a payout for them politically and perhaps operationally, which is even more ominous. Where does that come from, and how do you combat that?
I mean, it comes from the core of this movement. I mean, if I were going to create an American insurgency, I'd want to infiltrate places of power. I'd want to infiltrate the media. I'd want to infiltrate Congress. I'd want to infiltrate the military. And that's what we've seen is this movement, and that's really what it is. This movement has extended to every organization, every power structure within our society. And that's why it's so difficult to combat. That's why the Pentagon continues to call domestic extremism our #1 national security. So the regulation has to come from within. Congress has got to do something about Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. The media has to responsibly deal with coverage. Voters have to vote them out. And the Pentagon has to stay vigilant, because every time they issue a call like this, there's a radical who's watching. There are people who are becoming radicalized, and their movement continues to grow. It's not just about how many voters that these people can get. It's about how many violent people with guns they can motivate to do things. And that's why the threat continues to grow and why the threat continues to rise.
That the crimes he allegedly committed as he sought to topple the power structure at DOJ were things that he still doesn't fear any accountability for, that either Trump would appoint him, would pardon him if he's elected again, or that he was acting at someone else's direction. What do you make of that list of witnesses?
I think they shouldn't be a list of witnesses. They should be a list of inmates in a jail cell or in Guantanamo. I mean, this is upside down world. I mean, you've got people like Gaetz and Taylor Greene who are kind of like 9/11 conspiracy people on steroids. I mean, this has gone to a whole nother level that is about rewriting history, but is also about circling the wagons, protecting their own, mobilizing their base, and naming targets. I mentioned the Boston FBI. They also arrested 3 people yesterday for threatening New Hampshire National Public Radio. So they're naming their targets. They're calling their punches. And there are smaller punches that are happening all the time. Attacks on members of the media, threats to election workers, threats on LGBTQ and pride parades. I mean, this is happening on a daily basis. And I keep going back to 9/11 because we had a national consciousness in this country about terrorism, about if you see something, say something. Everyone was vigilant. That's the kind of vigilance we need now in this country with regard to domestic terrorism. And we need the president to set that stage, and we need all national leaders to remind people about what this is all about. We can't let them rewrite history. We also can't let them mobilize their forces to overthrow our government, because they've said that's what they want to do. And there are little pieces of it every single day in the news headlines, but below the surface. And if you and others aren't bringing attention to it, I don't think most Americans, frankly, see it, Nicole.
Now, that's actually a massive number because that means there are 12 million American adults who are comfortable with violence being one of the tools used to restore Donald Trump to the White House after he lost, after lawsuits brought by his team were defeated and rulings made by Trump-appointed judges. It feels like we're at this very precarious moment where it's all connected, but if we refuse to sort of see it as part of a piece, we might miss something.
This is a very urgent moment. And you and I have discussed before how we talked about 9/11 and said, why didn't we hear the signs? Why didn't we respond? Well, this is a strategic threat, and it requires a strategic response. And that's what we haven't seen so far. We've been middling around the edges. You've seen piecemeal responses. After 9/11, we had the 9/11 Commission. We had the Patriot Act. We had the Department of Homeland Security. Every police department and fire department is still reaping the benefits of the mass infusion of resources after 9/11. We haven't had a national strategic response to this national strategic threat. The Pentagon's been sounding the alarm. Frank's been sounding the alarm. Chris is out there doing heroic work, trying to combat them in the field. But we haven't had a national response, and that's what we need. We need to get ahead of this, and it needs to be set by the commander-in-chief. I know it's a difficult thing to do, and it's going to be a hard thing for him to do, but he's got to do it now in this moment and enlist everybody around him, just like we did after 9/11. This should be a clear and present danger, not just to Democrats, not just to people in the press, not just to the LGBT community. It's a threat to all Americans, and it has to be treated that way.
Yeah, I think, Paul, one of the things that we get wrong, too, is waiting for a circuit breaker moment. There won't be one. I mean, if it wasn't January 6th, it ain't coming. And I am certainly disgusted by Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar, but I'm terrified by Kevin McCarthy because he sees these things the way people do on Earth One. He just refuses to act the way one would have to act if they wanted to protect the whole country from that intersection of extremism and violence. What do we do about that?
Hope is not a course of action. I mean, yes, we should have both parties working together, but we don't. So we have to move out accordingly. We have to address the strategic threat with the resources that we have. And if the Republicans won't come along, then Biden and the Democrats have to do without them. And the FBI is already doing that. The Department of Defense is already doing that. But we need to take the gloves off. We need to stop screwing around here and really start calling it what it is and keeping the focus and enlisting resources. And the president's going to take some political pain over it, but it's going to be a lot less than the political pain he'll take if we have another Waco or we have another Oklahoma City. I mean, he's done a good job at times in naming it, but he's got to crack through and he's got to find new ways to do it. I mean, this is all hands on deck. And if you're not with us, you're against us. And if you have to call out Kevin McCarthy and doing it, then you do it. And if you have to investigate Marjorie Taylor Greene and Gates, you do it. You do whatever you have to do because the president's #1 job is to defend the American people. And that's what he has to do now.